Hi, everyone. My name is Bree Rennie, and I'm the Programs Coordinator at the Office of Disability Services.
Anytime we get a chance to talk in front of a group of people, we like to start out with talking a little bit about the overview of the student population of students with disabilities here at CU. We also plan to talk about how students can get registered with our office, ways to talk about disability, if you are meeting one-on-one with a student, resources, and leaving plenty of time at the end of the presentation for questions as well. I just realized, is my screen still being shared?
Yes. It looks
yep.
like it,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Just didn't see the lovely green glow you usually see. So, all righty, we will get started then. So here at Disability Services at CU Boulder, our students make up about 11% of the student population. When we compare that to national standards of about 20% of people identify as having a disability, definitely is a smaller representation, but in the past couple of years, we've seen that growth from 7% to 11%. And so that's a huge growth here on our campus and in what we're seeing on campuses nationwide as well. We also assume that that 20% is probably more representative of our student population here, but not all students feel they need accommodations to access their classrooms at CU Boulder. So just kind of to give a little perspective, that's about 4,000, a little over 4,000 students that we serve each semester. Our office defines disability through the ADA definition. And so a person with a disability is defined as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. When we think about major life activities, the areas that come up on a university campus are obviously most often related to learning. When we're looking at this graph, how we have broken it down is students with their primary disability diagnosis that they identify with. And here at CU Boulder, you'll notice the top 3 diagnoses are ADHD, mental health diagnoses, and learning disabilities. That means that most of the student population identifying as a person with a disability actually has what we call invisible disabilities. So if you were to look at them, you wouldn't know that this person has a disability. Just really helpful when we're talking about our student population to have in mind who we mean, and also to understand that while this may be someone's primary disability, actually more and more so, we are seeing students coming in with what we call comorbid diagnoses or having multiple diagnoses that impact them in different ways. So now that you know a little bit about the student population here at CU, just want to take a moment to clarify what our office does. So Disability Services' charge on campus is to provide academic accommodations, housing and dining accommodations for all students. We'll talk a little bit about additional resources on campus for faculty and staff who identify as having a disability, but that's our main charge. We also help support students with temporary medical conditions. So we'll talk a little bit, they don't yet meet criteria or may never meet criteria of a disability. We also have been working on programming, and over the years that's ebbed and flowed, especially with the pandemic, but we're really excited to have Bree's position, programs coordinator, to really strengthen our community of students with disabilities. We also provide different types of advocacy support and a lot of campus referrals if we're not the right spot for a student. When we say the term academic accommodations, the most common accommodations here on our campus are related to testing. So say a student needs some type of extended time on an exam or quiz, or what we have deemed a distraction reduced environment, since we can't guarantee there will never be a distraction that enters the room. Some other areas include note-taking options, your classroom materials in alternate format. So for example, say someone needs their textbook to be converted into Braille, we're able to do that on our campus. Any type of physical access, if there was an issue with the student being able to access the classroom. And then additionally, we have a small population of students approved for what we call our flex plan, which is flexibility with attendance and assignment deadlines. We also have a wide range of other accommodations, more customized, but just kind of to give broad categories that you all probably see. When it comes to housing and dining accommodations, once again, it's very customized to the individual student, but most often what we see are things like a student who has some type of disability where they need access to a bathroom, and or a student who needs access to a single room. For dining, we can also expect that sometimes students, if they have a really severe allergy, they may need to prepare their own food and aren't able to safely enter, different types of facilities on campus.
When talking a little more in depth about TMCs, which is a temporary medical condition, this looks like students that have either gotten a concussion skiing in the mountains or broken their arms skateboarding outside of Libby Hall. So we're happy to serve any student that has a temporary injury. We call these adjustments when we are approving them in our office. So a student will come to Disability Services, register with us for a TMC, and we'll schedule them a 30-minute appointment. And kind of what happened and how we could best support them in the classroom. From there, we go ahead and approve things that we best fit, which could either be, as Meg mentioned earlier, note takers, different testing accommodations. Sometimes when we have students break their wrist, we help them out with scribes, and we provide these letters to their professors. Again, because this is a temporary medical condition, this is not a registered disability, which means that we provide these as adjustments to the professor. We recommend that these adjustments are implemented in the classroom, but at the end of the day, we are not able to enforce them in the classroom like we would for a registered disability. Next up, we have our Student Testing Center, which is fairly new here to us on campus. It's in the first floor of the case building, and this kind of allows for our office to help accommodate students with more intense testing accommodations, whether that be a scribe, a reader, or double time on exams. We're hoping to expand out to time and a half in DRE in the future, which is time and a half on exams and quizzes in distraction-reduced environment, as Meg mentioned earlier. But for now, we are just kind of identifying the more intense testing accommodations in our testing center.
So with that information about what our office does, one key point that can be really helpful is if a student comes to you, and we'll talk a little bit about if they kind of have some key phrases they discuss with you, but you want to point them to our office as a referral source. How students get registered with us is by contacting our office. And so parents are more than welcome to outreach to our office, but students are our main point of contact, just like the rest of the university. If a professor has a concern or a question about a student, we also always use the student as our main point of contact as well. So say a student contacts our office, we always offer to them either to immediately start the registration process, or we offer something called information sessions, where students and actually faculty and staff as well can just learn about our office, the services we provide. If a student in that meeting discloses information about themselves, we can tailor that session a little bit so that they have an understanding of what the process would look like for them. But it is no means that we're taking a record of that student or that they have to get registered with us. It's just an opportunity to learn more about our office. Students don't have to do an information session first, though. Through our website, we have something called an accommodate portal that we'll talk about. Students submit an application for accommodations on that portal so that we have an understanding of their diagnoses, symptoms, and ways that they're seeking to be supported before we meet with them for what we call an access meeting. We also encourage students to submit documentation ahead of that access meeting, but we can also use the access meeting time to learn more about them, their self-report, and talk a little bit about the type of documentation we would need to have on file in our office regarding their type of disability. We then work with the student and determine what would be reasonable accommodations here in higher education, specifically for CU, which can look different across different campuses. And then we also work to implement those accommodations. Students don't have to meet with us every semester. As I mentioned, we serve over 4,000 students, and so it wouldn't be possible for us to meet with every student every semester. But if a student has a question or concern, we have office hours always available twice a week for each access coordinator, which is their case manager. They can always email or call their access coordinator. And we do work one-on-one with plenty of students throughout the semester to make sure they feel supported. One thing that I like to talk about with our registration process is that students can get registered with disability services at any point in the semester. Disability is a really unique identity where it can happen at any point in time across the lifespan. So for example, it seems like, unfortunately, every year right before finals, maybe a student has a really nasty accident, whether that's skiing or a car accident. And actually, instead of having a temporary medical condition, they immediately have some type of disability. They could still get registered with our office closer to the end of the semester, and we would work with them to provide them information and resources about all options available to them, including accommodations. Once a student is registered with our office, that's where our partnership with faculty and staff come in. So after the student has been approved for accommodations, they have to initiate in our Accommodate portal for an individual letter to get sent to every single one of their professors. That letter then lists out for the professor what accommodations they're approved for, if there was some type of end date because it's more so temporary in nature, and how to implement those accommodations. The bottom of our letters also always have our student responsibilities and faculty responsibilities, and I'll show those in a second as well, and a spot for the student and the faculty member to sign within the portal to recognize that, yep, I've read this letter. We also at the bottom of the letter always have what we call our access coordinator contact information. So as I said, each student is assigned a case manager, which we call access coordinators, so that faculty know for this student, this is who I can reach out to. So at the bottom of each accommodation letter, and what we discuss in access meetings with students are about their responsibilities. We ask students to always confirm with their professor that they've received a copy of the accommodation letter, because we know that with technology, there can be hiccups, or with just busy schedules, and making sure first and foremost, has your professor seen this letter? Then we ask students and faculty members to work together to schedule a meeting time to talk about the accommodations listed, so that there's a clear understanding and action plan regarding how will they get their extended time on an exam, if there's any questions or concerns that we need to work out before that. We also ask that faculty and students both confirm ahead of any exam or quiz and make sure that the student knows where they're supposed to be, or is this going to be on Canvas, that type of information. We also, oh, sorry, go ahead, Bree. I'm on a roll.
You're good. Years ago, our office created a syllabus statement for professors to put onto their syllabi when presenting it in front of the class, or for students to refer to when reviewing that individual syllabus. So something that we have here on the syllabus statement, it just kind of discusses how you would get registered with disability services, especially for students that may not know that they need these services. Students that have never even seen a disability services office before, or don't know what accommodations are. This is just to help students really get that information in and make sure that they have access to all the resources that they may need while navigating through college. For programming, DS has a wonderful programming office, and what we do really varies across a wide range. We do lots of workshops and trainings, as we're here today presenting for you all. We have a new academic coaching program where we have 2 peer academic coaches, which are students here at CU Boulder, and a regular academic coach, and they meet with students weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly that are registered with our office specifically, and they work on things like note-taking, different strategies to kind of balance ADHD, how to go ahead and use testing accommodations in the classroom if they still have questions on it. Just things that are kind of more geared towards disability rather than their actual college that they may be registered with. We also have inclusive and adaptive sports. Something that we have here at CU Boulder is something called Goal Ball, which is designed specifically for athletes with vision impairment. Participants compete in teams of 3 and try and throw a ball that has bells embedded into the opponent's goal. The ball is thrown by hand and never kicked using ear-hand coordination, which means that students that are able-bodied usually are blindfolded to make the sport more inclusive. And again, it's just a fun way to get to know other students. We do have a program called Eye to Eye as well, which is where we have students at CU Boulder usually team up and they go ahead and mentor students that are within the Boulder Valley School District. This again is just kind of teaching students that are in that Boulder Valley School District how to manage ADHD. What are some tools that they used and how are they best able to support other students that may need assistance? We also have the Workforce Recruitment Program, which is a referral program that connects federal and private sector employees nationwide with highly motivated college students and recent graduates with disabilities who are eager to demonstrate their abilities in the workplace through summer or permanent jobs. We also have a wonderful program that we launched last year, which is our Peers program. This program is the program for education and enrichment of relational skills is an evidence-based social skills program designed for young adults on the autism spectrum disorder, which just allows students that have ASD to kind of get into a group and figure out how to socialize and make sure that they feel comfortable in various social situations, especially when coming to college.
So these next couple slides, I tried to tailor based off of questions that we've heard from the College of Arts and Sciences before faculty and staff. And the first and foremost one is people get a little nervous sometimes talking about disability, whether it's talking about disability with colleagues or to their actual students. And so we've kind of made a couple hot tip bullet points that I wanted to discuss. First and foremost, always starting with person first language when it comes to people with disabilities. So an example of that would be student who uses a wheelchair instead of a wheelchair bound student. If a student identifies themselves in a different way, maybe that they do prefer being called like a blind student or something like that, they'll let you know. But it just like other identity bases, we always recommend person first language because we see the students as a person first and their disability diagnosis second. Referring to disability services sometimes can be tricky. If a student comes to you and they're talking about academic difficulties, you can provide them with a wide range of resources, but always include our office in case we may be the right resource for them. However, if a student is meeting with you in office hours or a coaching meeting or an advising meeting, and they're talking about things like, you know, they flat out say they have a disability or they use diagnosis terms like I have ADHD, or they talk about that they had accommodations in high school, which would be words like 504 plan or IEP. You could tell them about our office directly then, and also include other resources as well so that they're well versed in what they have available to them as a CU Boulder student. We also recommend that if you have a student with a temporary medical condition that you're sending them to our office so that we can help the student in case, like we mentioned, they need some extra resources such as someone to write their exam for them while they dictate it, things like that. There's no reason to discuss disability status unless it's relevant to the conversation. And so, for example, you wouldn't want to tell a student, I think you have a disability. That wouldn't be kind of a place of someone on our campus. That would be more so a medical professional that would make a decision like that. We also ask that you don't ask a student what their disability diagnosis is. That's private, confidential information, but they may choose to share with you so that you have a better understanding of who they are as a whole when you meet with them in person or virtually. Also, we ask that faculty members do not or advisors do not ask for any type of medical documentation. Our office has been charged with holding all confidential medical information related to students with disabilities. And so we wouldn't want faculty requesting some type of medical documentation. Wardenberg and CAPS no longer do those kind of, back in the day when I first started here, they'd do like a little stamped kind of half sheet saying, yep, this student had a doctor appointment or has this, going on. Instead, we would ask that you direct the student to send any medical documentation to our office and work with us as the experts on campus of determining accommodations in collaboration with faculty members. Like I shared earlier, if a faculty or staff member would like to learn even more about our office or has a certain scenario that they'd like to discuss, we can always do an information session. Especially since we're recording today, when we get to the questions portion of this, I ask that you don't bring up like a certain student's name or a really easily identifiable case, just so that we're being careful about students' privacy. When also we're thinking about disability, another hot tip is anything that you have, that you're saying out loud, that you also put it in writing. So say, for example, you meet with a student one-on-one in an office hour, or again, an advising meeting or something, sending a follow-up email after that session of what you all discussed can just be a great like multi-model way of approaching universal design learning with any type of student. And so that's sometimes a scenario that comes up as well, is how to best support a student with disabilities. Lastly, our office can always confirm if a student is registered with us, but we can never share diagnoses, symptoms, again, medical documentation. If you have information about a student that you want to share with us, you're always welcome to share. We just may not be able to share information back with you. All righty. And then some common scenarios, but first I have a question in the chat that I'm going to address. Are there options for students to get a diagnosis on campus? Examples include ADHD, learning disability, anxiety, depression. That's a really great question. And so we have what we call a referral list, and so does CAPS, the Counseling and Psychological Services Center here on campus, for students who may need more specialized testing to get diagnosed with something called a wide range of learning disabilities, whether that's in math, writing, or reading. Only very specific types of degrees are able to make that diagnosis. And so it's called a neuropsychological evaluation or educational evaluation. And actually the Ramey Clinic here on campus is able to provide that type of testing, but they usually have a long wait list. CAPS is able to provide, excuse me, is able to provide different types of diagnoses related to mental health conditions. So things like schizophrenia, bipolar, anxiety disorders, depression disorders. And so we also refer a lot of students there. And then we have this long list of referrals for community-based clinicians, and so does CAPS for ADHD testing, learning disability testing, things like that. Our office also, as part of our programming, we have scholarships available every semester, including what we call an assessment award to help students who may have a financial need and have never been tested before for ADHD or a learning disability, but suspect that they may have it. So thank you, really good questions. If you ever have a student that kind of asks you about that, you can definitely direct them to our office so that we can get them those referral lists. Some other common scenarios that I feel like I get asked a lot, and to try and help kind of differentiate our office from other offices. So say a student, you're a faculty member here on campus, and they email you and ask if they can set up a time to discuss their accommodations for your specific course. Perfect, that's exactly what we ask students to do. And so hopefully that is what's happening, and that you guys can work out a time that works for both of you to discuss the accommodation letter. But say a student is coming to you and they're feeling like they've been discriminated against or treated differently, and they say it's specifically related to their disability status. Our office does not investigate any acts of discrimination. That's the Office of Institutional Equity and Compliance, or OIEC. but we would want to work with that student to make sure we can help them feel that their accommodations are being implemented. And so we would ask that you also tell the student to come back to our office so that we can work with them on any implementation concerns. But anything related to feeling discriminated against, you would follow the usual OIC report link. Say you have a student, you don't know if they have a disability or not, but they're displaying some concerning behaviors in the classroom, or maybe they're sending you strange communications over email or in one-on-one meetings. An example of that could be maybe like an excessive number of emails in a day. We would recommend starting, if you don't know they're registered with us, or even if you do, starting with the student support and case management team. They are here on campus to help kind of triage situations and gather information, because maybe if the student is popping up in your office hours, perhaps they're showing up in another office, and we want to make sure that they're feeling fully supported. And so they're a great resource. If you, in any scenario, if you ever know a student's registered with us, you can always let us know too, so that we can kind of help streamline where that student should be going.
On our website, we have resources like how to add extended time on Canvas, what the specific accommodation process is, FAQs, syllabus statement, and how to access and utilize the Accommodate portal for all faculty and staff if needed.
Other campus resources we wanted to highlight before we jump into the question portion is, first and foremost, our digital accessibility office. We have this really great resource here at CU Boulder if you wanted to learn more proactively how to make your classroom materials or your advising materials, your coaching materials accessible. They have really great how-to videos. They actually hold office hours or can host one-on-one appointments. They can come to team meetings to teach a different type of skill. So say, for example, you want to learn how to caption your YouTube videos prior to maybe a student needing that as an accommodation, or you want to make sure your PowerPoint slides are accessible to all types of people who are using technology to read the screen. They would be a great office for kind of learning that information. Yes, there's a monthly newsletter that can from the digital accessibility office that you can sign up for as well. And they kind of give that month like a more in-depth way of learning a accessibility tip. Some of the offices we work most closely with include CAPS, the counseling services, and student support case management, like I've mentioned earlier. We also like to highlight our health services over in Wardenburg. They have different types of care teams, including a chronic care team that can be useful for students. There's also a concussion care team, an eating disorder care team. Of course, tutoring resources and academic advisors and coaches available throughout the different colleges. And then I also included links, since we talked about the Office of Institutional Equity and Compliance, OIEC. And as I mentioned earlier, our ADA office is the entity on campus if you're a faculty or staff member that identifies as a person with a disability and are seeking accommodations for yourself. Or if you work with someone who brings up needing accommodations, this would be a great referral. We work really closely with the ADA office, but especially for students who are more in that graduate program or PhD level, where it's hard to sometimes know, is it their job status or is it their student status that needs to be accommodated? And we work together to brainstorm on that. ADA also is the office that provides any resources if you were going to host an event on campus and needed some type of interpreting, live captioning, things of that nature. We also here have our contact information in case you ever need to get a hold of us more generally. Our phone number, we're available in the C4C building on the second floor, which is really the same floor as the dining hall, but it's technically the second floor, and our website. If people would like the slides, I'd ask, you can send it in the chat or private message me, and so that I can send you these slides with all the links as well. That would be great. And then I wanted to open it up for questions, because we recognize that you're probably here because you've been exposed to students with disabilities and have some questions. And so you're welcome to come off chat, or excuse me, come off mute. or you can put it in the chat and we can also answer.
Yeah, I had one question. I guess I have two, but the first one is how often, if at all, do students need to kind of like resubmit their accommodations? I know each semester they would need to talk because they have new professors, but each semester they need to kind of clarify, like, I still have XYZ disability.
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on the nature of the diagnosis. Where this shows up the most often is temporary medical conditions. So say someone gets a concussion, that can actually turn into a more permanent disability diagnosis. We call it post-concussive syndrome or a traumatic brain injury. And so we would kind of need more information showing that this has crossed over from something temporary to more static in nature. Otherwise, for students, correct. The main thing is that every semester they have to initiate the process for their accommodation letters to go to each professor. But most conditions, we don't ask for additional documentation once we've determined it's a permanent disability and it will be impacting them during their tenure at CU. Thank you. Any other questions that we could help answer? Yeah, Eileen.
I am wondering, we have a faculty member or two who schedule extended time, finals or midterms. And we have a departmentally controlled space that we can often fit them in, but I wasn't sure. It doesn't seem like it's an official, I think it's probably open to more students than students who have registered disabilities. Is there anything that I need to do different to make sure that we're both accommodating the students that are in the classroom who have the official disability services information on file and have the accommodation letters versus students where I think the faculty member just gives an opportunity for additional time and it's more of an unofficial matter?
Yeah, definitely the priority for space would be those that have been determined to have a disability and have gone through the registration process with our office. And if there's a student that a professor has, professional discretion to provide an extension or some type of agreement, that would be just exactly that. It would be kind of like a courtesy. We wouldn't view it as the same as a legal accommodation that's been determined by our office. But faculty definitely are allowed to have the professional discretion to provide situations as they arise. We would also encourage that the faculty members ask the students to get registered with us so that we can help determine if there's a disability related need. But we recognize sometimes there's students who are working with maybe OVA and don't meet criteria for a disability, but have very significant things going on in their life that they may need adjustments within the classroom courtesy wise.
Okay, great. Is there any, one of the reasons why I ran into it or was wondering about it is because I had initially tried to get an actual classroom space. But when I said that it was for like an extended final, because I tried doing it through EMS, through the room scheduling thing, and then they said that we couldn't and then had to go through the testing center because it was, who knows, I see your look of concern.
Yeah.
But I just wasn't sure so I wanted to make sure that we were going about doing it the right way. And if there comes a point where we cannot use the departmentally controlled classroom that we have because we have limited, it's somewhat departmentally controlled, but not fully departmentally controlled. So I wasn't sure if there was, if I ever do try to reserve a classroom space for an extended time test, if it's an unofficial one, if there's any other ways that I can do that, or if there's any tips you can give me to see for an unofficial testing accommodation if I can find something on campus.
Yeah, yep, we understand academic scheduling, correct, going through the EMS scheduling system. Sounds like there was a miscommunication, and so I'll have our student testing center reach out to our contact with EMS testing, because correct, our services, we are not always able to accommodate all students with all accommodations, and still work closely with departments and faculty to implement that extended time 1.5 and distraction reduced environment. But if you are running into a concern or a question, reaching out to our office so that we can help problem solve, especially when it comes to space, would be great.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And like Bree mentioned earlier, we started our pilot actually for our student testing center in March 2020. And then everything went remote. And then things were hybrid. And so last academic spring, it felt like was our first real robust semester of getting to try out our student testing center and learning the kinks. And so we're working on continuing to get, expanded services and hours and things like that as well.
We have a couple of questions in the chat.
Great.
One is, if high school students with disabilities are interested in possibly attending CU, how do they find out if this may be a fit or not?
Yeah, so information sessions are actually most popular with our incoming students. So students who are kind of looking at different campuses, trying to determine what's the right fit, including for different identities and programming. And so we would encourage those high schoolers to do some type of information session with us. We also almost always are represented in some way, either in a panel or at a tabling event for those students at kind of those prospective years, those different types of events CU puts on, or also if they are committed students, we're represented tabling events that way so they can ask questions. We can't determine if a student would have certain accommodations before they become a confirmed committed student at CU Boulder though, but we can give them ideas of what our office provides, what our programming looks like, things like that.
Thank you. Another question in the chat. When students have had educational testing in high school or elementary/middle school, say for ADHD, do they typically need to be retested to receive accommodations at CU?
Yeah, another good question. This more so shows up for learning disabilities instead of ADHD. Our the type of documentation that is acceptable for ADHD can wide range in the types of clinicians that can write it, versus learning disabilities. Once again, those are very specific types of degrees, such as a psychologist. And how that shows up for us is that we ask that the information is within the last 3 to 5 years max, and preferably has been normed to adult norms, because here in higher education, they are being compared to their adult peers. And so that way we have an understanding of how their disability is impacting them more currently versus when they were in first grade, say. Let's see, and then more questions.
Yeah, there's one more in the chat there.
Okay.
Actually,
So
two more.
let's see. It sounds like a faculty assembly disability committee at CU Denver is holding a 2-day virtual symposium on disability, intersectionality, and social justice. Very cool. I had not heard about that. We'll reach out to their office. We have some contacts over there. Does CU Boulder hold symposiums on disability inclusion for students, staff, and faculty? We actually are a part of the new health and wellness division, and health and wellness every single fall, I would say, has a symposium that they call a summit. And so we're always represented in different types of presentations as a more broader idea of health and wellness. We also usually are a part of any type of disability or diversity summits available on campus. Last year, we had a couple speakers that we collaborated with, actually CMCI on. So we try to, as part of our advocacy support, have opportunities like that out there, but we don't have a very specific 2-day event like CU Denver, and that's a really cool idea. And then does DS offer regular meetings with students who feel supported? Whoop. Is this something that is offered to some students or something we can promote to students? Oh, I see. So we kind of use professional discretion depending on if we have a student that maybe is having a semester where they're having a lot going on, or maybe it's a really new disability diagnosis, and so they're struggling to kind of navigate the accommodation system. But we would encourage any student that has questions or concerns to contact their access coordinator so that they can talk about more regular check-ins. Let's see, what else can colleges and departments do to improve inclusion and thus reduce loss of students with disabilities? That's a great question. We have been working on retention data with our Office of Data Analytics. And so we're hoping to start using that information, especially with our programming services. And so I'd say first and foremost, promoting our office, making sure students know that we're here, making sure that students know about our programming available. And then things like this, any chance that we can get to talk to a group of faculty or staff or students by being invited to department meetings, being invited to other types of summits on campus. The more visibility we have, the more that we could advocate for students with disabilities so that more and more people can be supporting them outside of just our walls here in the C4C. But other ideas that come to mind also include just kind of these daily one-on-one interactions. Since our student population at CU, you won't ever know unless they share with you if they identify as a person with a disability. And so kind of trying to have a multi-model view of universal design, also keeping in mind that person first language so that you're creating a welcoming environment in your meetings. Let's see. Another great question about the inclusive higher education for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. From my experience, I've actually been here since 2016. So I was here when this was enacted, and we have a couple campus partners we know, especially University of Northern Colorado, for example, who have this pilot program. And Boulder has not been a part of this program historically, but it's something that we've talked about as kind of like a statewide more so initiative. And so it's nothing that's ever off the table. It's just nothing that's in the works. These are all really great questions. Just out of curiosity, do we have more faculty in the room or staff in the room? I don't know if people would feel comfortable kind of putting that in the chat or not.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Staff.
Thank you. That's helpful to know.
It's like
I should have started with that question. So I apologize for all of the very faculty heavy slides. We tailor it a little differently for staff, but not much.
So I did have a quick question. I want to acknowledge that, this information session is for how we can support our students. You did mention, though, in the beginning that Disability Services Office helps with faculty and staff accommodations, but that you were limited in what you could do. Can you elaborate a little on that?
So more so our partner, the ADA office here on campus, who fall under the Office of Institutional Equity and Compliance, they provide accommodations to faculty and staff on campus. What we provide is for only students, but we work closely with them when students have kind of a dual roles on campus.
Any other questions?
Well, it was lovely to meet everyone. Bree and I really appreciate you taking the time to join this session and learn more and help support students with disabilities on campus. And I will work on anyone who did ask for the slides. We'll send you that over email later today. And if anything else comes up, please reach out to our office. The most important thing I want you to know leaving this session is that we're here for any type of question and trying to problem solve.
Yes, thank you all for attending this session. I put in the chat a link to our office's event survey. If you have a chance and can fill it out, that would be great. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I hope everyone has a great day. Bye.